3:22 a.m. Port of Houston. Ship Channel Gate 14. A CBP agriculture specialist ran a handheld density scanner across container MRKU-773491. The readout showed 11,400 kilograms. The manifest declared 8,200. 3,200 kilos didn't belong. Within 90 minutes, that single container would trigger a federal response spanning 3 agencies, 4 states, and 14 shipping containers, totaling $96 million in seized Iranian military hardware. The vessel was the MV Coastal Promise, a 620-foot Panamax freighter flying a Liberian flag. It had departed Jebel Ali, UAE, on January 28, 2026, carrying mixed commercial cargo destined for 3 Gulf Coast ports. Houston was the second stop. The ship carried 1,847 containers total. 14 of those containers belonged to a company called Gulf Meridian Industrial Solutions, registered in the UAE with a Houston-based consignee. That consignee was Caspian Hydro Systems, Incasian, a hydraulic pump and industrial valve supplier operating from a 12,000-square-foot warehouse in Katy, Texas. Real website, real clients, real revenue, $4.7 million in the prior fiscal year, 11 employees, an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau. Nothing about Caspian looked wrong until the weight didn't match. CBP officer Diana Salcido had been working the overnight inspection rotation at Barber's Cut Terminal for 3 years. Container weight discrepancies were common, maybe 1 in 40. Most were clerical errors. Shipper declares metric tons, manifest shows short tons. Conversion mistakes, rounding. Nobody investigates a 6% variance, but MRKU 773491 showed a 39% discrepancy. That number sat outside every normal explanation. Salcido flagged it for secondary inspection. The container was pulled from the stack and routed to the non-intrusive inspection facility at Gate 14. A Voxys gamma ray scanner, the large-scale imaging system used for shipping containers, produced an X-ray image at 3:41 a.m. The manifest said industrial centrifugal pumps. 48 units, packed in wooden crates with foam inserts. The X-ray showed the pumps. They were there. But inside each pump housing, where the impeller assembly should sit, the scan revealed dense, geometrically precise objects that had no business being inside water pumps. Salcido called her supervisor. The supervisor called the port director. The port director called HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. By 4:30 a.m., the first HSI agents arrived at Barber's Cut. They opened MRKU 773491 at 5:12 a.m. The wooden crates looked standard. Industrial stenciling. Proper moisture barriers. The pumps themselves were real. Manufactured by a legitimate Indian company called Rajesh Fluid Dynamics, based in Gujarat. Each pump weighed roughly 170 kilograms, except these weighed 240. Inside the first pump housing, packed in custom-milled foam cavities, agents found 3 inertial navigation modules. Military grade, each one roughly the size of a shoebox. Markings had been removed, but the circuit board architecture matched known Iranian manufactured guidance components, the type used in Noor series anti-ship cruise missiles. The second pump contained encrypted radio transceivers, frequency hopping units with specifications far beyond any commercial application. The third held servo actuators for missile fin control surfaces. 14 containers. 48 pumps per container. 672 pumps total. Not every pump was loaded. Roughly 60% carried concealed components. 403 pumps with military hardware hidden inside them. HSY Special Agent Ricardo Vega supervised the initial evidence cataloging. He'd worked port interdiction cases for 11 years. He'd seen drugs concealed inside machinery, counterfeit goods inside legitimate shipments. But weaponry at this scale, concealed with this level of sophistication, this was different. The concealment wasn't improvised. Someone had designed custom foam inserts for each type of component. The pump housings had been modified. Internal chambers milled out to precise dimensions, then reassembled so that external measurements remained unchanged. A visual inspection wouldn't catch it. Even a standard X-ray might miss it if the operator wasn't looking for density anomalies inside the pump bodies. Weight was the only giveaway. And weight had given it away only because one container out of 14 had been selected for random secondary screening. Vega made 2 calls, the first to the HSI Houston field office, the second to the FBI's Counterintelligence Division in Washington. By February 4th, 2026, the scope of the investigation had expanded beyond what any single agency could manage. HSY identified the shipping chain. Gulf Meridian Industrial Solutions, the UAE consignee, had been incorporated in Ras Al Khaimah on September 12, 2025. Its sole director was a Jordanian national named Faisal al-Rashidi, age 44, whose passport showed 16 trips between Muscat, Istanbul, and Panama City in the preceding 18 months. A second company, Anatolian Trade Logistics, registered in Istanbul on October 3, 2025, had handled the freight forwarding from Turkey to the UAE. A third, Pacifica Canal Services, registered in Panama on October 17, 2025, provided the ocean freight brokerage that booked space on the MV Coastal Promise. 3 companies, 3 jurisdictions, all registered within a 35-day window, none older than 5 months. The FBI's Counterintelligence Division assigned the case to a squad specializing in Iranian procurement networks. The squad had been tracking similar patterns for years. Shell companies created rapidly, used for 1 or 2 shipments, then abandoned. The technique was called burn and rotate. Set up a chain, move cargo, dissolve the companies before investigators can trace them. Start fresh with new names, new jurisdictions, but this shipment hadn't dissolved yet. It had been caught mid-cycle. FBI Supervisory Special Agent Karen Mitchell coordinated the interagency task force. HSI handled the portside evidence and the shipping chain. FBI counterintelligence worked the procurement origins and any U.S.-based intelligence angles. And NCIS, the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, was brought in for a specific reason. 3 of the inertial navigation modules recovered from container MRKU 7734-291 carried microscopic lot numbers that had been acid-etched, but remained partially legible under electron microscopy. NCIS ran those lot numbers through their classified database of recovered Iranian military components. 2 matched fragments previously cataloged from a Nor variant cruise missile that had struck a merchant tanker in the Strait of Hormuz in April 2025. That missile had been fired from an IRGC coastal battery near Bandar Abbas. The components in Houston weren't just military hardware, they were components from an active weapons program that had already targeted vessels in a theater where U.S. Navy ships operated daily. That connection elevated the investigation to a national security priority. If you're finding this breakdown valuable, hit the like button now. More details are coming. The task force needed to answer 3 questions. First, who was receiving the shipment on the U.S. side? Second, how long had this pipeline been operating? Third, were there other shipments already in transit? The first question had a name attached to it already. Caspian Hydro Systems, Inquisitor the Katy, Texas company listed as the consignee on all 14 containers. Its owner and sole operator, Dariush Montazeri, age 52, born in Isfahan, Iran. Immigrated to the United States in 2003. Naturalized citizen since 2011. No criminal record, no intelligence flags. A mechanical engineer by training who'd built a modest but functional business, importing industrial pumps and hydraulic components primarily from India and Turkey. Montazeri's company was legitimate. That was the problem. Caspian had been importing centrifugal pumps from Rajesh Fluid Dynamics for 4 years. Legitimate orders, Legitimate customs entries, the same pump models, the same shipping routes, the same Indian manufacturer. CBP had cleared dozens of Caspian shipments over the years without incident. Someone had hijacked that trust. Used Montazeri's established import pattern as cover for military contraband. The pumps were real. The supplier was real. The modification, the hollowing out and loading of weapons components, happened somewhere between the factory in Gujarat and the port in Jebel Ali. HSI traced the logistics. Rajesh Fluid Dynamics shipped the pumps from Mundra Port, India to Jebel Ali. Standard. But the pumps spent 11 days in a bonded warehouse in Jebel Ali before being loaded onto the MV Coastal Promise. Satellite imagery obtained through intelligence channels showed the warehouse was operated by Gulf Meridian, the shell company. During those 11 days, the pumps were unpacked, modified, reloaded, and resealed. The question was whether Montazeri knew. FBI surveillance of Montazeri began on February 6, 2026. Physical surveillance. Electronic surveillance under a FISA warrant approved on February 5th. Agents monitored his phone, his email, his movements, his finances. Within the first week, two things became clear. Montazeri's communications showed no awareness that the February shipment contained anything unusual. His emails to the Rajesh factory discussed routine order specifications. His calls to his customs broker focused on tariff classifications. He was, by all observable behavior, expecting 48 pumps per container and nothing else. The second discovery came from financial analysis. Montazeri's personal bank account showed normal patterns for a small business owner with $4.7 million in annual revenue. But his business account showed something else. Starting in August 2025, Caspian Hydro Systems had received 4 wire transfers totaling $1.2 million from an account at Halkbank in Istanbul. The transfers were labeled as advance payments for Q1 2026 procurement services. Caspian didn't offer procurement services. It imported and resold pumps. These payments had no corresponding invoices in Montazeri's bookkeeping. When agents later confronted Montazeri, he would explain those payments as a consulting arrangement, brokered by an old contact from Isfahan, a man he knew only as Behzad. No last name, no company, no written agreement. Montazeri said he'd been told the money was for facilitating introductions between Turkish industrial suppliers and Gulf-based buyers. He said he'd done nothing except make phone calls. Whether Montazeri was a witting participant or a manipulated intermediary became a central question of the investigation. The evidence suggested something in between. A man who didn't ask questions when money appeared because he didn't want to know the answers. While HSI and the FBI focused on the U.S. side, NCIS pursued the procurement chain backward toward Iran. The guidance components, transceivers, and servo actuators found in the pumps were manufactured by entities under the authority of Iran's Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces Logistics, MODAFL. MODAFL procurement networks had been under international sanctions for over a decade. NCIS analysts, working with signals intelligence and allied services, identified the network's Iranian side coordinator as a mid-ranking IRGC logistics officer operating under commercial cover in Dubai. His role was to source components from Iranian military stockpiles, arrange their transport to the Jebel Ali modification warehouse, and oversee the concealment process. Faisal al-Rashidi, the Jordanian director of Gulf Meridian, was identified as a professional facilitator, a middleman who set up and managed shell companies for a fee. Al-Rashidi had no ideological connection to Iran. He was a contractor. His services had previously appeared in connection with sanctions evasion schemes involving North Korean mining equipment and Russian electronics. The Istanbul link, Anatolian Trade Logistics, was run by a Turkish national named Cemal Yildiz, age 38. Yildiz operated a legitimate freight forwarding business in the Eminönü district of Istanbul. He also, according to Turkish financial intelligence reports shared through bilateral channels, maintained a parallel set of books for clients who needed cargo to move without attracting attention. His fee structure was straightforward: 12% of declared cargo value, paid in advance, half in cryptocurrency. The Panama company, Pacifica Canal Services, was a paper entity. Registered address in a shared office building in Panama City. No employees, no phone line. Its sole function was to book container space on ocean carriers using clean documentation that wouldn't trigger screening algorithms. 3 countries, 3 facilitators, 1 pipeline, and it had been operating longer than anyone initially realized. HSI pulled historical shipping data for all vessels that had called at Jebel Ali and delivered cargo to Caspian hydro systems in the preceding 2 years. There had been 7 previous shipments from Gulf Meridian or predecessor entities using similar routing. The earliest was dated April 2024. 7 prior shipments. If each carried a similar volume of concealed components, the network had moved an estimated $380 million worth of Iranian military hardware into the United States over 18 months. Not all of it had stayed in the country. Financial analysis of Caspian's shipping records showed that Montazeri had re-exported portions of certain shipments to end users in 3 countries: Egypt, Malaysia, and Brazil. The pumps went to legitimate industrial buyers, but the components concealed inside them, those went somewhere else. HSY couldn't determine where. The trail vanished at the re-export point. This was the question that changed the investigation's scope. Where did 18 months of smuggled military components end up? Subscribe now. This channel covers operations most people never hear about. On February 19, 2026, the task force held a secure video conference with representatives from the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, the State Department's Bureau of International Security and Non-Proliferation, and the Director of National Intelligence's National Counterproliferation Center. The briefing lasted 4 hours. 3 critical decisions emerged. First, expand the investigation to include the 7 prior shipments. Trace every component, every re-export, every end user. Second, coordinate with allied intelligence services in the UAE, Turkey, India, and Panama for simultaneous action against the overseas nodes of the network. Third, prepare arrest warrants and seizure orders for the US-based targets. The timing would be synchronized with overseas operations to prevent the network from shutting down and destroying evidence when the first arrests hit the news. Simultaneous multinational action. That required 6 weeks of coordination across time zones, legal systems, and intelligence sharing agreements. During those 6 weeks, the surveillance of Montazeri continued. His behavior didn't change. He went to his warehouse. He processed orders. He had lunch at the same Turkish restaurant in Katy 3 times a week. He called his mother in Isfahan every Sunday. But the surveillance also identified 10 additional individuals connected to the network's U.S. operations. Not all were directly involved in the smuggling. Some were financial intermediaries, people who moved money through the network without necessarily knowing what was being transported. Others were logistics contacts, warehouse workers, freight brokers, truck drivers, who had handled shipments on behalf of Caspian at various points. One individual stood out: Shahram Tavakoli, age 47, a dual Iranian-Canadian citizen living in New Orleans. Tavakoli ran a marine electronics repair company that serviced vessels in the Gulf of Mexico. His connection to Montazeri was indirect. They'd never communicated directly. But Tavakoli's company had received 3 shipments from Caspian over the prior year, each containing equipment that, on paper, was commercial marine electronics. NCIS examined the specifications of the equipment Tavakoli received. The items were real marine electronics: GPS units, radar components, radio transceivers, all commercially available. But NCIS analysts noted that several of the transceivers matched specifications for Iranian-manufactured naval communication systems. They weren't counterfeit commercial units. They were military transceivers recased in commercial housings. Tavakoli's marine electronics repair shop was, in effect, a laundry for Iranian naval communications gear. Equipment came in looking like commercial product. It went out looking like commercial product, but it performed to military specifications. and Tavakoli's client list included ship management companies in the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean, some of which had known associations with IRGC-linked shipping entities. The network wasn't just smuggling components into the United States. It was using US-based companies to clean, repackage, and redistribute Iranian military technology to end users globally. The United States was a waypoint, not a destination. In Norfolk, Virginia, a third node emerged. A retired U.S. Navy Chief Petty Officer named Gerald Rawlings, age 56, ran a consulting firm that provided technical advisory services to foreign navies purchasing secondhand U.S. military equipment through the Foreign Military Sales Program. Rawlings had security clearances that had been deactivated upon his retirement in 2019. He had no active access to classified systems. But Rawlings had something else: relationships. Contacts inside naval procurement offices in multiple countries. Knowledge of how U.S. naval systems worked, how they were maintained, how their components were sourced. And communications records showing regular contact with Kemal Yildiz in Istanbul. FBI counterintelligence assessed that Rawlings served as the network's technical consultant. He didn't handle cargo. He didn't move money. He provided specifications and told the procurement chain exactly which components to source, which lot numbers to look for, which modifications were needed to integrate Iranian-manufactured subsystems into platforms designed for Western equipment. His expertise made the concealment possible. Rawlings was paid through a Gibraltar-registered company that received funds from Yildiz's parallel books. The payments were modest by the network's standards, $340,000 over 18 months. But they represented something the FBI took very seriously. A former U.S. military member providing technical guidance to a sanctions evasion network linked to the IRGC March 2026. The task force finalized the operational plan. The date was set, March 19, 2026. The arrest plan called for simultaneous operations at 5 locations across 3 states: Houston, Texas, Caspian Hydro Systems warehouse in Katy, and Dariush Montazeri's residence in the Memorial area. 2 teams. HSI tactical operators supported by FBI arrest teams. New Orleans, Louisiana, Shahram Tavakoli's marine electronics shop on Chupatula Street, and his apartment in the warehouse district. 2 teams. FBI led with support from NCIS Norfolk, Virginia, Gerald Rawlings' consulting office in a commercial park near the naval base, and his home in Virginia Beach. 2 teams. FBI counterintelligence with NCIS support. 37 federal agents across 3 cities. 22 search warrants, 11 arrest warrants, all synchronized to execute at 6 a.m. Central Time on March 19, 2026. Overseas coordination was handled separately. UAE authorities had agreed to raid the Gulf Meridian warehouse in Jebel Ali. Turkish police would move on Yildiz's office in Istanbul. Panamanian authorities would seize records from Pacifica Canal Services. And Interpol had issued a red notice for Faisal al-Rashidi. 6 a.m. Central Time, March 19, 2026. In Katy, Texas, HSY tactical agents approached the Caspian warehouse from 2 directions. The building sat at the end of a dead-end road in a light industrial park. 1-story, metal siding. 3 roll-up bay doors on the east side. A glass-fronted office on the north side. 2 vehicles in the parking lot, both registered to Caspian. The entry was clean. Agents used a breaching tool on the office door. Inside, they found Montazeri sitting at his desk. He was on the phone with a supplier in India, discussing a shipment of replacement impellers. He didn't resist. He asked agents to let him finish his call. They didn't. The warehouse contained approximately $2.3 million worth of industrial pumps and hydraulic equipment. Legitimate inventory. But a locked storage room in the northwest corner held something else. 47 modified pump housings. Empty, their internal chambers already milled out. Ready to receive components that hadn't yet arrived. The next shipment had been scheduled for April. 14 more containers. The network was still active. Had been active right up to the moment of arrest. At Montazeri's home, agents recovered 3 cell phones, 2 laptops, and a safe containing $87,000 in cash and 4 gold bars weighing 1 kilogram each. They also found a handwritten notebook with names, phone numbers, and what appeared to be shipping codes, written in Farsi. Montazeri would later claim the notebook belonged to Behzad and had been left at his home during a visit in November of 2025. In New Orleans, the raid on Tavakoli's shop on Chupatula Street started at 6 a.m. Central Time. FBI agents entered through the front. 2 NCIS agents covered the rear loading dock. Tavakoli was not on site. His apartment in the warehouse district was hit simultaneously. He was there. Tavakoli attempted to destroy evidence. When agents breached his apartment door, they found him standing over the kitchen sink with a laptop, running water over it. The laptop was recovered, but the hard drive sustained significant water damage. FBI digital forensics later recovered approximately 60% of the data. Inside Tavakoli's shop, agents found a workbench with 17 Iranian-manufactured naval transceivers in various stages of recasing. Serial numbers had been removed. Commercial housings, manufactured by a Japanese electronics company, sat on a shelf nearby, ready to receive the military internals. The transceivers were functional. NCIS estimated their military value at $4.2 million. Tavakoli also had documentation showing upcoming deliveries to 4 ship management companies. 2 in Dubai, 1 in Karachi, 1 in Colombo. Those deliveries were intercepted by Allied services within 48 hours. In Norfolk, the arrest of Gerald Rawlings was the most straightforward. Agents arrived at his Virginia Beach home at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Rawlings answered the door in a bathrobe. He was cooperative. He said, "I figured this was coming." At his office, agents found a classified document from 2017, a technical manual for the AN/SLQ-32 electronic warfare system. Rawlings had retained the document after his retirement, in violation of his debriefing agreements. The manual had no classification markings on its cover. They'd been removed, but the content was classified secret. Rawlings's retention of this document added an additional charge: unauthorized retention of national defense information under 18 U.S.C. Section 793 SLA. This single charge carried a maximum sentence of 10 years, more than the sanctions-related charges alone. Across all 3 cities, 11 individuals were taken into custody by 8 a.m. Central Time. The primary targets, Montazeri, Tavakoli, and Rawlings, plus 8 additional individuals including warehouse workers, a customs broker, 2 freight company employees, and a financial consultant who'd structured the Halk Bank wire transfers. Overseas operations produced mixed results. UAE authorities raided the Gulf Meridian warehouse and seized equipment but made no arrests. The IRGC logistics officer had left Dubai on March 15th, 4 days before the operation. Turkish police detained Cemal Yildiz at his Istanbul office. He was cooperative and provided access to his parallel financial records, which documented $23 million in transactions related to the network over 3 years. Faisal al-Rashidi was not located. The Interpol Red Notice remained active. Intelligence reports suggested he was in Oman, possibly under the protection of contacts in the Muscat business community. As of early April 2026, he had not been apprehended. The total value of military hardware seized: $96 million across all 14 containers, plus the in-process materials found at Tavakoli's shop and the modified pump housings at Montazeri's warehouse. This figure represented one shipment. The estimated total value of hardware moved through the network over its 18-month lifespan remained classified, though the $380 million estimate was referenced in unsealed court documents. The indictments were unsealed on March 21, 2026. The primary charges: conspiracy to violate the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, smuggling goods in violation of U.S. sanctions on Iran, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. Rawlings faced the additional retention charge. Montazeri's defense team, based in Houston, immediately signaled that their client would argue he was an unwitting participant, a businessman whose import channels were exploited without his knowledge. Prosecutors responded by pointing to the $1.2 million in unexplained wire transfers, the gold bars, the handwritten notebook, and the 47 pre-modified pump housings found in his warehouse. If Montazeri didn't know what was happening, why were there empty, modified pump housings waiting for the next shipment? That question, prosecutors said, would be central to trial. Tavakoli retained a defense attorney in New Orleans and declined to cooperate. His attempted destruction of the laptop was entered as evidence of consciousness of guilt. Rawlings cooperated, partially. He acknowledged his consulting role with Yildiz, but claimed he believed the work involved helping Turkish defense contractors understand Western equipment standards. He denied knowledge of any Iranian connection. Prosecutors had his communications records, which included encrypted messages referencing the Isfahan program and Modafel specifications. Sentencing guidelines for the charges ranged from 5 to 20 years per count. With multiple counts stacked, the primary defendants faced potential sentences exceeding 30 years. Leave a comment. What should happen to the components that were already redistributed? The investigation also revealed the vulnerability it had exposed. Caspian Hydro Systems had been importing the same products from the same factory through the same shipping routes for 4 years. CBP had cleared those shipments dozens of times. The system was designed to build trust profiles for importers. The more consistent your history, the less scrutiny you received. The network exploited that trust architecture by keeping the external parameters identical. Same shipper, same product, same route, same consignee. And only modifying the contents of the pumps themselves, they operated inside the system's blind spot. CBP's non-intrusive inspection rate for trusted importers averaged 7%, meaning 93% of containers from established low-risk importers were never scanned. Container MRKU 77349291 fell into the 7% purely by random selection. If it hadn't been selected, if the random number generator had pointed one container over, the shipment would have been delivered to Caspian's warehouse in Katy, unloaded, and the military components would have been extracted and distributed. The April shipment would have followed, and the one after that. One random inspection, that was the margin. NCIS's post-seizure analysis of the recovered components confirmed that some matched systems involved in 3 separate incidents in the Strait of Hormuz between March and November 2025. Guidance modules, communication transceivers, fin actuators. The components weren't theoretical threats. They were parts of weapons that had already been used against commercial and potentially naval targets. The military components recovered in Houston were transferred to the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Dahlgren, Virginia, for technical exploitation. The full results of that analysis remain classified. 4 elements of the investigation remained unresolved as of April 2026. First, the 7 prior shipments. If the estimated $380 million in components had been moved into the United States over 18 months, the vast majority had already been redistributed. To where? Through which intermediaries? The re-export records from Caspian showed Egypt, Malaysia, and Brazil as initial destinations. Beyond that, the trail went cold. Those components were in the field, somewhere. Second, the IRGC logistics officer who fled Dubai 4 days before the raids. His departure suggested a leak, either from the UAE side, the Turkish side, or from within the U.S. investigation itself. A damage assessment was underway. No conclusions had been published. Third, Faisal al-Rashidi, still at large, the professional facilitator who built and managed the Shell company infrastructure. Without his arrest and cooperation, the full architecture of the financial pipeline remained partially obscured. Fourth, the April shipment. The MV that was scheduled to carry the next 14 containers had departed Mundra Port, India, on March 12, 2026, 7 days before the raids. It was intercepted by the U.S. Coast Guard in international waters on March 22nd and diverted to a military facility for inspection. The results of that inspection were not disclosed. The network is dismantled. 11 people are in custody. $96 million in military hardware sits in an evidence warehouse in Houston. But somewhere, components from 7 prior shipments are already installed in weapon systems. Already operational. Already pointed at targets in shipping lanes where tankers and warships transit daily. The random inspection caught the 8th shipment. It didn't catch the first 7.